Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and I apologize ahead of time for the lighting and audio. I spent about 50 hours on the road this week, driving all the way from the East Coast to Texas and back, taking a northern route and then a southern route, and then driving all over to go to Military Creator Con. It was a phenomenal event, and you can find out more about that online and in some other episodes, but I'm still not home yet, so this is not my studio setup, but we're going to make it work because we are here to talk about something very important, and that is happiness. And there are a lot of conversations around it, a lot of misconceptions, some great stuff out there, some not so great stuff. And I want to start with one of my favorite quotes from the Bible from Proverbs 17:22 is a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. And that has nothing to do with religion or faith, but basically the human condition, which is when you're not happy, it drains you. It drains you emotionally, spiritually, physically. And we're going to get into that. We're going to get into the foundational pillars of happiness and what we can do to be happy in what I like to call right now a very unhappy world. We are so focused on the negative, but there is a lot of happiness to be had. But all the platforms we're on are directing our minds and our views into the negative, right? That's always been the issue with the news, with social media, and we're not seeing that. So, Mr. Matt O'Neill, you are here to help have this conversation about happiness, an author, a coach, a speaker. We're great to have you with your expertise here. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Man, I'm so happy to be here with you today.
No
And
pun intended.
I mean it, man. I am. And I absolutely love studying human psychology and helping people get out of negative feelings, help people get out of that crushed spirit I love that Proverbs quote. It's beautiful and get into a cheerful heart because when we are in a cheerful heart, not only do we feel good, but we light up everybody around us. We're the best that we can be in the world. And there's times I'm not. There's times I have a crushed spirit and I'm like, okay, that's why I got into this work because I struggled with negative emotions and wasn't always the nicest guy to be around, wasn't the best boss to be around, but I had a like true passion about how to feel good and how to get out of these funks. And that was like my thing. I'm like, how can I get out of this funk that I'm in? And I studied and studied and studied and studied. And then I started to coach and coach and coach. And now that's just my passion. I just love helping people get out of a funk and get back into that cheerful heart. So that's why I do what I do.
100%. I think saying that we hear a lot is that, life is too short to not be happy. Life is too short to just spend your time bitter and angry. And unfortunately, one of the things we have to talk about is that people are going to hate you for being happy. People who are not happy are going to be envious and bitter. But like you said, it's so important to be that example. And one of the things I thought about immediately was the military environment where it is just, we call it like negativity vomiting happening left and right, where everyone is taking out their bad day on you, they're taking out their frustrations on you, and all they're doing is pouring out all these negative emotions. I mean, everyone all day. Whereas if we had a environment where people were doing their best to be happy, making the most of the situation, and encouraging one another and providing positivity toward one another, well, we call it, as a nuclear operator, I have to say it's a chain reaction, right? It is a
Mhm.
chain reaction, but we need to initiate that, and that's the
Both
hard part.
both are chain reactions. That's
Yeah.
what's great is that emotions are contagious. So that negative emotion is contagious, that they're having a bad day. Like I'm married. We've got four kids. My wife's having a bad day. Her emotion affects the family. Or my oldest daughter, she's having a bad day. Like her emotion, she brings that energy into the room. It all of us feel it. We're all affected by it, but vice versa. My wife's having a great day. And then she can turn around one of my kids' moods like that because her positive emotion is so infectious. So I call it like the wake. You're on a
Mm.
boat and you see the wake, and the wake leaves ripples and ripples and ripples. It's like, what kind of wake am I going to leave today? Is every room I go into, am I going to light it up? And I'm going to be that force that's so powerful that I'm helping everybody get out of their funk? Or is my weight going to be negative and I'm going to take people that were already having a good day and help them have a terrible day? And at the end of your life, you can look back and you can say, what was the wake that I left on days upon days upon days? But I love what you said at the start right there, that life is too short to waste feeling bitter. There was a study done by Cornell. They interviewed 1,000 people in the last decade of their life. And one of the consistent findings with people who were in their 80s looking back at their life was they said, I wish I hadn't wasted so much time being unhappy.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard a lot of similar things from people I know who were on their deathbed or reevaluating life. And, a lot of people hold all these grudges and then look back and they're like, man, I gave up all those relationships, all those experiences over what something that is so insignificant now. Really, what it becomes, and this is my personal opinion, but I think really what it's about is oftentimes it becomes more about the pride or the principle than what actually happened. And in those cases where it's more about your pride and reputation of saying, no, I'm not forgiving this person, that's not who I am, it's like over the most insignificant things so many years later. And it's like we look at all those things we could be missing out on. And I think, it is so important. I want to go back though to just get some contextual information about how did your childhood shape what you're doing now? Would you say you were very happy-go-lucky growing up, or you mentioned being in some of those funks? What role did your childhood play in what you do now?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's only eight negative emotions, eight primary negative emotions. One of those negative emotions is pride. And you just hit on my pride now can create a lot of issues for me. But I experienced all eight negative emotions growing up. And my dad was a really negative force in the house. He was military as well. So thank you for your service and thank you for everybody who serves. But he I guess ran the house maybe like a military.
Mm,
And it wasn't an encouraging, positive environment. It was a really tough environment. And because when you don't feel authentically confident in yourself, you want to drop people down below you to feel better. You think that's the way to feel better. And we're all just trying, we're doing these negative emotions aren't, they're all trying to help us accomplish something. So when he was putting everyone in the house down, me and my mom and my siblings, he was doing it to try to feel good himself. Like if they're smaller than me, then I'll be bigger. It just doesn't work that way. When we push other people down, we actually don't feel good. We feel worse. And no one taught him that if you elevated and lifted people up, that you actually would be happier. So yeah, it was really tough just being raised by him. And then the worst part was he then abandoned us when I was 5. And
mm,
so even though he was not somebody that was good for me, it was even worse as a 5-year-old to say, well, now I can't even have the abuse. Like he doesn't like I'm not good enough for him even to be around.
wow.
And then that created in me, a lot of feelings that I wasn't lovable, that I wasn't good enough. And so I wanted to prove to the world I was good enough through accomplishing, right? But I was trying to fill a void with accomplishments so that I felt worthwhile inside, and that doesn't work. And so ultimately that led to substance abuse because no matter how much I did, it wasn't enough to feel good. And then that's not a good thing either. That starts to make you spiral more. By the grace of God, I was introduced to principles of actual happiness. And I started to recognize that all these emotions that I was experiencing, all the negative feelings, were because of the eight negative emotions. The most primary one was shame, this emotion of this feeling that I wasn't lovable as I was, that there was something wrong with me. And it's innocent, right? I'm a 5-year-old, I'm a kid, and my dad doesn't want to be around me anymore. And I think it's because of me that I'm not lovable. But that's a decision that I made as a kid that then I didn't know I made. And now I'm 25, still feeling that way, that I'm not lovable and I'm not good enough. I didn't realize I had programmed that emotion into me. It did serve me though. And this is the thing, these negative emotions can serve you because that feeling that I wasn't enough caused me to try to prove to the world I was enough, which made me a really high producer.
Mm. Well, and one thing we've discussed a lot on the show, which maybe you can relate to as well, is that those feelings of being unlovable oftentimes lead to people pleasing. And people pleasing oftentimes leads to the compromise of your own happiness, right? Because
Hmm.
part of your happiness stems from the validation of serving others. But at the same time, when you're people pleasing, you often neglect yourself, which is compromising your true internal happiness. You're chasing it for this validation happiness, which ultimately is fulfilling to a degree, but at the cost of yourself, eventually it burns you out. And so we've had a lot of conversations on this podcast about people pleasing, its role in happiness, and I'd love for your commentary on that as well.
Oh man, you're so wise, dude. You like, yeah, that's it. Exactly. Exactly. And so in what we'll do is we'll compromise our own values to people please. And when we compromise our own values, then we don't like ourselves. And when we don't like ourselves, it's downward spiral. So let's talk about how to get out of this stuff because
Right, right, right.
because that's the next step. The first step is to recognize that we have negative emotions that we know that aren't serving us. And then the next step is to say, okay, well, how do I get out of these negative emotions and how do I start living in positive emotions? And it is 100% programmable. So all of our negative emotions, we programmed into ourselves and we did it for things that we thought were going to help us. And once we become an adult, we can reprogram each of those emotions. We can reprogram our tendency to want to people please. And then we can in serving others, of course, and being kind and doing nice things for people does light us up as long as we're doing it from a place of integrity, like
Mm,
where we're not sacrificing ourselves, that we're doing it because we feel like doing
right.
it, not because we want them to like us like that. But to get to that point, man, there's so many steps. So the first step is to know that what these 8 negative emotions are, why they show up, why we do them, why we think they're going to help us, and then recognize when we get into one of them why we're doing it so that we can get our way out of it. The first I've already talked about is this feeling that we're not enough. The second is the people pleasing emotion, and that's guilt. That
Mm,
people pleasers typically feel like this was me for sure. Like I want to be a perfectionist. I want to do everything right so that people like me, so that then I feel good about myself, right? That's the people pleasing.
right.
So this emotion of guilt is saying that what I do isn't ever going to be good enough. The emotion of shame is I'm at my core, something is fundamentally wrong with me as a human, that I am not good enough. But the emotion of guilt is what I do will never be good enough.
Mm,
Both of those are lies. We think they're both going to help us though. Like if I keep thinking I'm not good enough, well, then I strive to be better. Or if I keep thinking that everything I do isn't going to be good enough, well, then I'll keep trying to do everything better. But both these things make us unhappy, which ultimately makes us a worse version of ourselves. And we perform worse with these emotions that we think are going to help us
mm,
perform better. And the reason is we kind of discussed it. When I feel amazing, man, I light up everybody around me. Everyone wants to be part of what I've got, and it's authentic. And I'm performing really well. Like when you feel on top of the world, you feel like you can do anything. Versus you're beating yourself up and it's not good enough and it should be better. And you're this perfectionist. Sure, sometimes you put out good work, but most of the time you feel so bad that you stop yourself from doing anything. In fact, you can make yourself feel so bad by saying it's not perfect enough that you can't even get out of bed. And that leads us to the third negative emotion. The third negative emotion is a feeling of hopelessness.
mm,
That no matter how much I do, it's hopeless because it'll never be enough. That's a lie. I actually got into that emotion earlier this week. I felt another word for hopelessness is overwhelm. That's another feeling in this third negative emotion. I just felt completely overwhelmed. I have a real estate company and things weren't going right and we were losing money. And I'm like, man, no matter how hard I work, it's just not enough. Well, I recognize, hey, this is hopeless thinking. And what's great is that each of these negative emotions has like a core lie attached to it. And so when I caught myself saying, no matter what I do, it's never enough and it's all up to me and it's all on my shoulders, I'm like, wait a minute, that's the lie of hopelessness. Is it a truth? This is one of the ways we can get out of it, is to say, let's examine the real evidence. Is it a truth that no matter what I do, it's never enough. And if I look back on my life, everything I've done has always been enough. So everything I do today will be enough. And then the other lie of overwhelm is it's all up to me. I'm like, is it a truth that it's all up to me? Or are there actually other people in this company that are helping me? So examining the evidence can help us unravel this lie that it's hopeless and that it's not going to get better and that it's all up to me. And those are the first three negative emotions. I'll break there to kind of get your thoughts on it.
I completely agree. One thing that a chief in the military stopped me because I am, or at least I was very serving of others at the cost of myself. He told me, Mr. Whiskey, even Superman couldn't save everyone. And my response was, I'm Batman. But, the point being that, the idea is, right, Superman is this very strong character, very powerful character, and even he couldn't save everyone. And what he was trying to say is, along the lines of what you just said, is it's not always all up to us. I think of Atlas for a mythology reference of holding the world on his back physically, and how
Yeah.
a lot of us try to do that emotionally and spiritually, with what we're doing with people. And I think that part of that is tied into pride, not wanting to ask people for help. And I think part of it definitely is that guilt of like, I need to do this myself. If I ask other people, I'm failing myself and them. So I completely agree. I think one thing that's important too is I share a lot when it comes to suicide prevention about Doom Spiro Sparrow, which is Latin, and it comes from, you'll see it on the license plates in South Carolina and with a lot of their merchandise. It means, while I breathe, I hope. And I say that because a lot of times we get so focused on the temporary, like suicide is an attempt at a permanent, quote, solution for a temporary issue. And I
Mm.
use that example because while I breathe, I hope, what it means is, as long as you're breathing, there are still future opportunities to make change. Now, the change that happens, it might not be at the pace you want, it might not be in the direction that you want, but you're still alive and there's still recovery as a possibility. When you commit suicide or you let that hopelessness overwhelm you in whatever facet, you are blocking off those opportunities. And so I really like saying, while I breathe, I hope. And we're always breathing 24/7. You don't consciously make that decision. Sometimes you do, but it's always happening, which means you should always have hope. And I think it's so important to stay grounded in that. I know hopelessness, we're so focused on this and that, but there is a much bigger picture that we need to remember. And we see these chain reactions, but ultimately we don't see all the things that are going to happen along the way, because none of us have that ability to see all these opportunities that come unexpectedly into our life. And so I think it's really important. Obviously, I've been there as well, that hopelessness, that overwhelm. I have a lot, especially as a solopreneur, doing everything myself, and at the point right now where I can't expand out for too much help. But I always stay grounded in, each day that we're alive is a blessing. Every time we wake up is a blessing. There are people right now, as we're talking, who did not just wake up right now. And we need to stay grounded in that and take advantage of what we have.
Absolutely. And it's a progression of moods. So each negative emotion from 1 through 16, and this is what I teach in my book, is the next step in feeling better.
Mm,
So, but at each step, it's like we put on a pair of colored glasses. So the person that is struggling with suicidal thoughts, they have on their hopeless colored glasses. And everything that they see is colored, like if you put on a pair of pink
right.
glasses, the whole world would look pink. We put on our hopeless glasses, the whole world looks hopeless. And the quote, while I breathe, I hope, wouldn't make any sense because there is no hope. It's like it's not going to get better, but it is a lie. It's a lie that there is no hope. And you're saying suicide is this permanent solution to a temporary problem. When we're really lost in hopelessness, we don't think it's temporary. But the truth is, it is temporary because, and if this goes back to examine the evidence, I'm sure everyone's been hopeless at some point, and then eventually we're not hopeless, right?
Right.
We get out of every single one of these emotions, but there's a way out of each of these emotions, and the way out is the next emotion that we can step into. And so to have hope, we step up into an emotion of Desire. Also a negative emotion, but it's higher on the spectrum of moods. It's higher on the progression. In desire, we start to desire other things. So it's hard sometimes if we're really, really hopeless, we can't even get out of bed. But I had somebody that shared with me, she said she was on the verge of suicide and she no longer cared. She's like, I can't get out of bed. But then she just was laying there in bed one day and she said, if there was something that I would have fun doing, what would it be? She's like, well, maybe I'd like to paint. She didn't want to go to work, so she wasn't going to work. She didn't want to exercise, so she wasn't exercising. She said, she just asked herself, is there something that would be fun? And she said, I might want to paint. So she got herself out of bed at some point in that day, went to Walmart, bought some paint supplies, and painted something that day. That kind of sparked a turnaround for her where she felt kind of proud of herself. And that's one of the other negative emotions we talked about was pride. But each emotion builds. So she went from hopeless to desire. I desire doing something that would be enjoyable, which was painting. The painting then made her feel pride. So she pulled herself out of hopelessness by using this progression. And it is, well, I breathe, I hope is a statement of somebody that has desire for a better future. And that's where I want everyone to get to. Anyone that's stuck in these lower emotions, the first positive step is, what do I desire? What do I actually want? What is something that would be happy? What is something that would make me feel good today? And then do that thing. Don't like grind out another workout or go to work because you hate it, because that'll just make you feel worse.
Mm.
Do something, desire something that you authentically want yourself. And then from desire, then we can start to build on it. But the first of the positive emotions, those are the negative emotions. The first of the positive emotions is humility. And that's kind of interesting because humility is the antidote to pride. So while I was saying feeling proud of yourself is good, what's even better is to have humility to something greater than yourself, and that's God. When we have humility to our creator and we say, thank you that I even get to be alive today. Like you said, not everybody wakes up. That is when things actually shift from negative to positive.
I agree 100%. We talk all the time about the power of starting and ending your day with gratitude compared to nothing. It is a really powerful shift. And maybe it's thank you notes on paper, maybe it's prayer, whatever it is, having that gratitude, I think really does shift you towards the positive because when you can have thanks and be appreciative of everything around you, I think personally, in my opinion, you value it more. And when you value all the small things throughout your day more, it really makes you value the whole day more, which brings us closer toward that happiness. And I'd love for you to continue up this progression of emotions.
Oh man, gratitude is one of the best habits that we could possibly form. So every emotion we've talked about is a habit. Feeling like we're not enough is a habit. It's just habitually thinking that same thought, I'm not enough.
Right.
Or people pleasing is a habit. Habitually thinking everybody has to like me. That's just a habit. Well, gratitude is also a habit, but gratitude is the best habit. So I've got a couple of steps that we can take to cement in this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful emotion. Gratitude is a really foundational piece of happiness. Next to my bed, I've got a piece of paper taped and it has two words on it. Thank you. So when I wake up, my first foot hits the ground and I say thank, and my right foot hits the ground and I say you. And as I walk through my bedroom to grab my phone and turn off my alarm, I'm saying thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Now my phone's on airplane mode. It's not, so I can't go and look at all the social media and the news and the craziness and the emails and start
That's
my
a good
morning
practice right there.
with stress, but I'm grabbing my alarm and sneaking out of the room as I get up earlier than my wife. And I want her to be happy when she wakes up. So, but I'm saying thank you, thank you, thank you as I walk through the house. That is the first way I start with gratitude. Then I make coffee because coffee makes us happy. Caffeine does elevate our mood. And as I'm sipping my coffee, I write down three brand new things today that I could be grateful for. because gratitude can become a rote practice if we think, oh, I got
Yeah.
to write down the same things that I'm grateful for. I want three brand new things I've never said thank you for every single day. I've been doing this practice of finding three new things to be grateful for over 10 years. So if you think about that, that's over 3,600 days times three. I've had to come up with 10,000 things I'm grateful for. You know what you figure out after 10,000 things? You can be grateful for everything. Like you can be grateful for the problem that showed up. I can be grateful that I fell into hopelessness this week. I could be grateful that I got out of hopelessness this week. I could be grateful that somebody said something encouraging, right? Like every single thing that happens, you can say, I'm grateful for that. There was a lesson there, or I'm grateful for that. It was just felt really good. So then before every meal, I say a prayer of gratitude. These are five pieces of gratitude that are stacked throughout the day, starting with it, no matter how stressed I feel in the morning, I'm starting with gratitude, writing down three new things, and then three different meals. Thank you, God, for this. Thank you, God, for this. Thank you, God, for this. So all throughout the day, I'm programming my mind for gratitude. You'd think after 10 years I'd have it, right? And I could stop. It's not how things work. It's a gratitude practice. We don't have a gratitude arrival. We have to continually practice, and practice continues to help us be more and more and more grateful, and it makes us happier.
I agree 100%. I think it's important to avoid it becoming just a routine that you're not experiencing and feeling to its full extent. And I think, like you said, there are so many things to be grateful for. And especially one of the things you mentioned is hardships, the negative emotions, being thankful for what we can cultivate from them, I think is one of the most important things. And it's something that, I've interviewed hundreds of people now who a lot of them, what they're doing, the impact that they're having came from hardship. And I think is about reassessing those hardships is one of the most important things we can do. And I'd love to just continue down this progression of emotions with you because I think it's really important. I think one thing we know is that the as contagious as positivity and negativity both are, I feel like the negative momentum is much more powerful. It's easier, and at least that's what
Positive
I've seen.
momentum is more powerful.
And I'd love for
It
you to
is.
elaborate on that.
The positive is more powerful than the negative. In the positive, so I look at the world as like everything's like in balance. There's an equal amount of antimatter as there is matter. There's dark and there's light. There's negativity. There's positivity. But every story, all the epic stories, the light always wins, right? So I think it's
That's true.
51% positive and 49% negative. They're both contagious, but we're fighting this battle of light versus dark within ourself every single day. Ultimately, though, the light wins. It does. I believe we're eternal souls and we're all in this evolution. And ultimately, all of us will come into embracing the light over the darkness. But it is a constant daily practice and choice. The next emotion on this progression, you just said, it's an emotion of acceptance.
Mm.
And we get to the emotion of acceptance. It's acceptance says not everything is going to go the way I want it to. And when it doesn't, it's actually good. I can do everything that I can do to help it become the best it can be. There's two other positive emotions before we get to acceptance, which is I'm going to take responsibility for everything in my life. I'm
Mm.
going to take responsibility for maybe I didn't cause the car crash, but it's my responsibility to fix my car. Maybe I didn't cause the car crash but it's my responsibility to fix my body. So taking responsibility for our life, no matter what happened, and not being a victim, that's another positive emotion beyond humility. Then having confident, like true confidence, not prideful confidence. True confidence comes from saying, no matter what happens, God will provide for me. Then moving to acceptance. And acceptance says, well, I don't want this thing to happen. I can accept that it is happening. And I can accept that it will ultimately help me become a greater version of myself. We can all cultivate acceptance by looking at the worst things that ever happened to us. I have a practice where I ask my client, write down the three worst things that ever happened to you. And if you're listening at home, you can write down the three worst things that ever happened to you or three bad things that happened to you. Then answer this question. How did you grow from that? Then say, how did you become a greater version of yourself because you endured that? And then say, how did this one experience change your life in a better way than it ever could have been without it? And you start to realize, oh my gosh, the worst things that happened, my dad abandoning me when I'm 5, right? That one of the worst things I felt like ever happened to me was one of the best things that ever happened because it sent me into a spiral of negative emotions. And then I had to get myself out of that. And then I wanted to teach others how to get themselves out of that. And now I'm so lit up and passionate about doing this, but none of that would have happened if I had the dad that I wanted. So actually, the worst thing becomes something that I wouldn't take back. I wouldn't take it back. But not everybody gets to like acceptance is a super, super high level on the progression of moods. And not everybody gets there. Some people would, and in fact, some of the reviews on my book, not many, but a couple people said the worst thing, my dad dying was one of the worst things that happened to this one reviewer. He said, my dad dying is not something that was good for me. I can't argue with that, right? That's that person's perspective. And at the same time, death happens to all of us and
Hmm.
it happens to everybody that we love. And because of death and knowing that our loved ones die, and I've had loved ones die, what the good in that is we wake up to how precious each person in our life that's still here is. It can teach us how beautiful our relationships are in a way that nothing else can. It can teach us that each day is a precious gift. And without death, we wouldn't know that.
I agree. And I want to go back to when I talk about the power of negative momentum. I think one of the things is that's making it so strong is the fact that we have a lot of negativity sounding boards around us. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of people in our personal circles, in the social circles, in mainstream media and social media who are echoing those negative thoughts that we're having, who are maybe through their highlights are making us feel comparatively worse. So I want to talk to you, Mr. O'Neill, about the negative momentum is building because of all these negative factors in our life that are kind of reinforcing these bad habits or these bad thoughts. How do we go about dealing with these negativity sounding boards in our lives?
Such a beautiful question. And I'm so glad that we're going to this because this is practical. The it, it's it's easy to delete the social media apps. That's easy to do. We just go into our phone and we hold down the app and it shakes and then we delete it. And not everybody does that. But social media is proven to make us less happy. It makes us anxious. It makes us comparing ourselves. We see other people's negative, the vast majority of people, 70 to 80% are living in one of the negative emotions, pride and below. Only between 20 and 30% are living in positive emotions. So the reason that social media is a negative space is because 70 to 80% of the people that are on it are in a negative headspace. And so what they're posting is negative.
Mm,
So the first step I would say is reduce some of these negative inputs. I didn't start with social media. I started by deleting the news.
mm,
I said, I'm not going to watch the news. I'm not going to read the news. I'm not going to have the news app. I'm not going to know what's going on in the world. And that's the reason that people tell me that fight back. They say, well, you're not going to know what's going on in the world. You won't know if a school just got shot, or you won't know if we go into war. I said, I always know because everyone around me talks about it.
that's
So
true.
I know, but I don't, but if I look at the news, because 70 to 80% of people's views are negative, the news has to be negative to relate to the majority of their audience. So delete the news. To make a decision. I'm not gonna look at that anymore. Okay, great. Now we've just taken a negative influence out of our view. Then delete the social media apps. And people are like, well, I need it for work. And maybe that's true, maybe it's not. Try. Try to not have social media. Just try. Or if you delete the app, but you need it for work, like your podcasts, we want to post things on social media. I have all the social media accounts, but I can only do it from my computer. So on my phone, where I am all the time, I get to be free from the negativity. And then when I need to post something for a podcast or something that I want to promote or help, like your show, I can go on my computer once a week and post things, but I don't have to sit there and consume the negative. But the one that's hardest, those two are easy. So the easy steps. Don't look at the news, just stop. Delete all those apps. Get out of it. You don't need it. If you want to be happy, you have to delete the negative inputs. And then delete the social media or figure out ways to significantly reduce it because it's not helping you to be happy. But the hardest one is people. How do we delete negative people? And
Mm,
they also have the biggest influence on us. So this is my step there. And it's, I want you to write on a piece of paper the 5 to 10 closest people to you. And then next to each person, rate them 1 to 10 on how positive of an influence they are. 10 is they lift you up and make you feel more loving and kind just being in their presence. One is they drain you down and make you feel more negative and drained in their presence. Look at your list. Anyone on that list that is below a 7 or an 8, you need to figure out, how can I reduce my time I spend with this person or eliminate the time I spend with this person? Sometimes they're a family member, like my dad, right? I'm not going to cut him. I made a decision when I was in my teens that I was going to cut him out. But when I became an adult, I said, I'm not going to abandon my dad. So even though he was a one on my list, I wasn't going to cut that relationship because
right.
being a son mattered to me. Taking care of him mattered to me. I just had to limit my exposure to his negativity. So what that limiting meant was I wasn't going to call him every week. I was going to check in once a month. And when I checked in once a month, I was going to do it in a protected space where I knew I had to fortify myself with positivity, go into the call knowing he was going to say things that were going to trigger me, but stay in such a high state that I wasn't going to let it affect me. This isn't easy to do, and I wasn't always good at it. Sometimes I'd get off the call and I'd feel terrible,
Right.
but it was only once a month. That's called limiting these negative associations. But then there were some associations like friends that weren't good for me, that weren't family members, that I just stopped calling back. I just cut. Like I always, if they invited me to things, I'd just be like, oh, I'm busy. Eventually, they realized I was always busy, and that relationship fizzled and died. And it created space in my life to go make friends with people who were more on that 7, 8, 9, 10 range, where they were pulling me into the person I wanted to become.
I agree 100%. Boundary setting is extremely important, and kind of some of what you're going through or have gone through is something that I've experienced with my father being in the midst of addiction, having to set boundaries on when I accept his phone calls and when not because of the negativity that he will sometimes bring into my life. And so I totally relate to that. And I think we can all relate to it. We all have some family member or friend who, to go back to the beginning of the episode, is just negativity vomiting about their life or whatever it is. And it's important to be there and listen for others, but it's also important, like you said, to protect your space and your happiness and finding the balance between that. One thing I want to go into is you've mentioned a few times your book, so I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about why you wrote it and who can benefit from reading it.
I was called to write it. So I was saying a prayer one morning in 2017, and my prayer was, how can I be the biggest service to the world? And I got a very clear answer, write a book. And it was crazy. It was a spiritual experience. It was something that it wasn't like it felt like it didn't come from my mind. It felt like I was being spoken to. And I took it very serious. And I said, okay, so I'm called to write this book. A couple of weeks later, the topic came to me, and the topic was how to get out of bad moods. Right? This whole Like all everything I cared about was helping turn around my funk, right? And then I was gonna then help people get out of these negative emotions. And then the whole progression of moods became very clear to me about I already knew of the 8 negative moods, but then I was like, well, there's probably levels of positive moods. And so the progression of positive moods came to me and so that's the whole book. The first half of the book is how to get out of the 8 negative moods. The second half of the book is how to fortify the 8 positive moods. And it thankfully became a bestseller and has helped people all over the world and has been a crazy blessing to me. Like it's so fulfilling to me that this work has changed people's lives.
I agree 100%. And I want to get into, I know, beyond the book, the book is just one form of service that you do. You are also a happiness coach. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, when somebody wants to go deeper, the best place to start, of course, is the book because it's the foundation of everything that I teach. But when somebody's like, "Hey, I get it, and I need a guide," I I I understand that these are the negative emotions, but you've been there and you've transcended those. I want that one-on-one help. That's what I do with those people that are ready to go further.
Yeah. And so how have you found, that work to be, and how has it gone with everyone you've been working with? Like, what are some common issues that you've encountered throughout your clients?
Addiction is really common.
Hmm.
And man, I think addiction is common for everyone. It's not always addiction to the same thing, right? But
Right.
I feel like everybody has some form of addiction that's unhealthy that I work with that always the addiction is in the desire to feel better, but it never actually works.
Right.
So, but the desire to feel better is the driver of it. And the only way to actually feel better is to get out of the negative thought patterns and then fortify stronger positive emotions. And then we can feel better all the time without the need of these props and these addictions. The other is like just negative loop thinking where we're counting on the world to make us feel better, like other people to validate us or us to get positive results or things to go our way. And we get addicted to, I need the world to go my way to feel happy. And the world's not going to go our way. So it won't work. It's not a lasting thing. So helping people learn how to be happy even when life is not going our way. That's the other common theme.
And then just out of curiosity, what would you say the happiest thing that happened to you this week was?
Man, there's a lot of them. It's such a beautiful question. I've got a 4-year-old son, and this morning he walked into my office. I was reading a book. He was the second person up, and he walks into my office and he crawls on my lap and he just laid down on my lap and I was rubbing his back. And then he looks at me and he makes a silly face and he's a dream come true for me. And I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. That was the happiest thing that happened to me today. But each day, this is the beautiful thing about gratitude. Each day there's beautiful things that happen. Each day there's things that we didn't want to happen. But I could probably think through each individual day and think of a beautiful, happy thing that happened.
For sure, I totally agree. And I've got my happiness right here, my Chihuahua.
Oh,
So,
hey,
uh,
cutie.
yeah, no, I would say, both children and pets, not to put them in the same category, they can be something that
Yes, put him
always
in the
makes us
same
happy.
category.
That could always,
I've got a dog. He is my best friend, man.
yeah,
Dogs
yeah,
are so happy. They are so so happiness studies, right? A dog increases happiness. It is a true connection. It is a true bond. It is a true relationship. There is true love there. Yeah, pets can make us so happy. And I don't have a cat, but I know people that are cat lovers and they get that same kind of bond and connection from their cat too.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's hard because like I'll come home maybe in a bad mood and my dog is like carefree, so happy to see me, and that energy like we talked about earlier, it's like all right, we're gonna go for a walk and de-stress, and I think there is lessons to be learned there from just taking that positive energy from someone who like my dog doesn't pay the bills. My dog just increases the bills, but I still love her. But I think, it's great. And you think about the way that your child or your pet who in their carefreeness is so happy about why we should be that way to affect other people, right? So when you come home and your dog is just so happy to see you and it changes your mood, you can have that same effect on other people through your positivity and happiness. And then that's one of the takeaways I want people to think about. Like we talked about, it is contagious. How can we be contagious? I think that's an important question to ask. And as we
So
wrap up this
that
episode, go ahead.
Yeah, so I want to just comment on that because it's actually the highest level of happiness. Love. It is the highest level that we can attain. So when we have people in our life that we love, then they could be coworkers, they could be friends, it doesn't have to be children or a spouse, but it can be, but they can be pets. Anytime our heart is open and loving, we are in our highest, most joyful state. So that is that's the highest level of the progression. We were talking about the progression. It ultimately gets to how loving can we be and how often can we stay with an open, loving heart. To the extent that we can be loving is to the extent that we can be happy.
I completely agree. And as we wrap up this episode, what would be your main takeaway you want everyone to reflect on when it comes to happiness?
Well, the main takeaway is what we just said is to be loving. It's not always easy. So you had mentioned earlier about bitterness would be a waste of our time. It is. There's lessons to be learned in bitterness that we're wasting our time. But the loving thing to do for ourselves is to forgive.
Mm,
So forgiveness is love that we give to the other person, but it's also love that we give to ourselves because we get out of the bitterness. So if there's anyone in your life that you have not yet fully forgiven, that's the work. That's the start. Until we get to this point that we've forgiven everybody, our heart will be have a lower capacity for love, which means we'll have a lower capacity for happiness.
I agree 100%. And, I will share, I was actually in a book about forgiveness, the book of Survival or Thrival Forgiveness. And, in that I wrote about, of course, a common theme we saw from it was multiple authors. The common theme was that forgiveness is for yourself as much, if not more, for the other people. And we talked earlier about burdens, carrying the world on yourself, and carrying all that unforgiveness can weigh down on your happiness. So, I agree 100%. And I just want to share with everyone that your website, which has your book and your coaching and a ton of great information, will be in description below for anyone checking it out. I know it can be very intimidating or sound too easy. When we talk about reprogram happiness, and you can concur on this, it's yes, it's an overnight change, but it's also not because we're talking about habits and breaking habits and forming new habits take time and practice. And so having your book, or like you mentioned, having to write down practical ways to actually take action on this is really important. So if you're listening to this conversation, it's not just about listening and absorbing it, but putting it into practice.
Wise words, my friend. Yeah, it's not easy. It's not, man. But everything that's worthwhile takes effort. And I don't think anything is more worthwhile than becoming the most loving, happy person that we could be. It's not easy. It does take daily effort, but it is so worth it. What else would we do? Be miserable?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Every day is going to be its own battle. Every day is going to present its own difficulties. And that's why I think having this conversation and spreading awareness and just reminding people. And so I ask everyone listening, not only think about what was the happiest part of your week, but what can you do to be the happiest part of someone else's week? And so, Mr. O'Neill, so great to have you here. Amazing conversation. I thank you for the work that you're doing and the service you're doing, and I hope that everyone has taken something away from our conversation.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me.